We're going to shift gears here a bit, and I want to introduce our panelists tonight. So with record low unemployment rates, what are some strategies for hiring and keeping developer talent? How do you get more women developers in the pipeline? Do you look to attract remote workers versus in-house staff, and why? These are some of the questions that we'll discuss tonight with our panelists. I'm going to take a short break and be an observer. Please welcome to the stage TAO's VP Teri Hockett to moderate the discussion about that with excuse me, Jesse Rosenzweig, former co-founder and CTO at AWS Elemental, and Mike Harrington, CTO of Amplion. Welcome.
Well, welcome, Jesse and Mike. I'm thrilled to be here. Really interesting. You guys have both exited quite nicely in the last few years and out of the area. So, Mike, you came from Seattle with a very nice exit, and a really nice exit out of Portland, and then moved to Bend. What's up? Why Bend? Why now?
So I grew up in Steamboat, Colorado, and I needed to kind of get back to the mountains and skiing and kayaking and mountain biking, and definitely giving my kids kind of that experience I grew up with. And both my wife's from Central Idaho too, so we moved to Portland thinking we'd be there for about 5 or 6 years, but 20 years later we got out to a better spot.
I didn't really have a plan. I had some friends who moved down here, and I happened to be at a time where I could move, and I think we came down to visit the friends on a Friday and put an offer on a house on Monday. And so we have a long history of doing that. But
I hear that story a lot, meeting different people that have moved here, come from a wedding or some other event, and decided to relocate and even start companies here. So with that, you both work in the tech field, and we have in Bend this year well over 500 job openings that are on schedule for software developers and others in the tech field. With record low unemployment rates and a skills gap problem, we're seeing an increase in remote workers. How has that impacted the companies that you have either launched or currently working at, as far as in the company culture arena and in blending the in-house people with the remote workers?
well, I joined Amplion, a local startup, about 6 months ago, and yeah, there we go.
I'll fix it here.
Okay, I'll just keep going. And
The further you take it away, the worse that's going to be. So put it right up to your mouth if you could. Yeah, there you go.
all right. I'm a tech person. They usually don't let me out in front of crowds. But, so I joined Amplion about 6 months ago, and one of the reasons I was brought in was to build the team. And I'd been in Bend for a while. I'd been commuting to Seattle, but I didn't really know much about what it meant to hire in Bend. And I learned quite a bit. The first thing that I did, I was introduced to a lot of other CTOs and CEOs around town in the tech industry, and I heard a bunch of different stories about how people hired for Bend, or it was, how difficult it is here, and some of there were a couple surprises in there. One was, I always heard that, Bend, I guess maybe people don't think this anymore, but Bend was relatively inexpensive. And, at some point in time, compared to Seattle, compared to San Francisco, it was a little closer. Okay, all right. And so one of the things that kind of opened up, my eyes was, the median house price in Bend is similar to Portland, and the idea that we could come here and put together a team quickly and inexpensively kind of went out the window right away. So that's when we started looking at remote workers. Yes, a couple different questions there, but the thing about having, kind of jumping ahead, the thing about having remote workers, once you've decided that that's the route for you, there's really no halfway. Because if you're going to have a team or individuals that work remotely, they really have to feel like a key part of the team. And if you have a culture in your office that is special and secret or different, or there's a lot of things that are available to people who are local versus the people who are remote, then you create you have a multi-tiered organization. And well, that may work for some kinds of companies. For a small startup like us, we had to actually put things in place to feel like one unified team. So a couple of those things were we, like I said, you're not partially pregnant. You're fully remote. So like for me, I'm here. I have an office, but our chief product officer is in the Bay Area. And so one of the things that I committed to her when she joined us was that like everybody's remote. So now I'm remote. So even though I have an office, I purposefully work remote, a couple days a week, and that just keeps us honest and keeps all the processes working. And if it works for me, it can work for any of the other team members. And the other part is just other cultural kinds of things. We bring people in. We make sure that people visit us on a regular basis. Everything that we do, every single meeting that we have is a video meeting. So sometimes I'll be in an office in part of our organization and realize I'm meeting with somebody 2 doors down. And, so I'll see the whiteboard. I'll get up and just go into the office. But that's some of the things that we do.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mike said. First of all, this is an awesome venue, by the way. I just want to say that really quick. So cool to see the entrepreneurs with all that energy. Brings back great memories of our energy and our, gonna take on the world. So congrats, guys. Yeah, my thoughts on this has evolved quite a bit. When we started Elemental, it was very, very, you gotta be in the office culture, like we're gonna be here in the office. Everybody comes in the morning and leaves in the evening, and it's 15 years ago or so now, so things have changed a bunch. And obviously it's possible now. I guess I still come back to those roots of, you're most efficient as a team when you're close together, you're at least in the same time zone, but you're like all sitting in the same room, able to kick around ideas and pivot and discuss and throw stuff on the whiteboard, and who's on a conference call recently, that hasn't gone as efficiently as you've wanted to. So yeah, the technology's there. Obviously it's happening. I wonder, just in the back of my mind, if this is just kind of a phase, like when we started Elemental, outsourcing was a big deal, like outsource a big piece of your technology and your core development. But obviously we have to embrace it now as leaders, and I was myself a remote employee for Amazon for 6 months. And it's also something, we saw this a lot too when we were interviewing people like who had been remote that kind of feel like, I need to get back to an office or need to get back to a community. So I think as long as you can provide that and both of those pieces, and then it can work. But I definitely totally agree that if you're going to be a remote culture, you gotta embrace that right off the bat. That means onboarding. That means meeting, getting together physically every once in a while too.
So can I ask a question? So how many people here have remote employees or are a remote employee themselves? So I think we're at this point in time where it's gone from like we both created companies 15 years or more ago where we worked really hard to make that office culture work really well. But now it seems like we're at a point in time where I think it's expected that some significant portion of the workforce will always be remote.
So Jesse, when we talked earlier, you really shared about the culture being in-house. And then when you did transition over the period of time with AWS and Elemental to having more remote workers due to being able to hire the right people and get them at the company, how did that affect the people that had started and really had embraced the in-house? Was there friction, and what was done to kind of alleviate some of that?
Yeah, so in general, we have a in-house culture. Everybody comes to the office. We're actually very clear up front when we hire folks that, hey, this is kind of the culture, and that's most people come to the office. And we have flexibility though, and if you need to work from home or if you're going to work from remotely, that's okay too. But we just kind of set expectations really early in the whole process, the whole onboarding process. The other thing is just set expectations of when you are remote. We expect that you're kind of performing at the same level as if you were local.
And Mike, when you're doing this now, you have a lot of remote workers, and you say like sometimes you're in the office. What kind of tools are most effective for making sure that everybody's at the table at the same time and dealing with time zones and the like?
Yeah, I think the nice thing is that the tools we use are just common tools that everybody uses, and we've gotten to a point where they're very accessible. So everything from either you're using the Microsoft products online or Google products online. Most everyone I know uses Slack for business chat and that kind of thing, and then pick your favorite video vendor. The one that seems to be working really well for us is Zoom. So between Zoom and Slack and online Google Documents, sometimes it's actually easier to work online. Like I was with somebody, we were editing a document, and so either I'm kind of hovering over them, and I've had coffee all day, so that's going well, and they're typing, and then I had to actually go do something at home, so I went home, and then we got back together, and then when we're at home, or wherever, we're both in the document at the same time. You see our cursors kind of bouncing around, we're talking, we can hear each other, and we were even more productive in that way. So I think the tools have really reached a point where remote work is accessible for pretty much anyone.
And when we've been talking, it's more remote workers that are employees, but with challenges, or do you see any challenges with offshore teams or outsourcing the teams?
Yeah, we attempted a few times to outsource pieces of kind of our core technology. That was a huge mistake. Like, that sentence should never be uttered in your company. Like, we're outsourcing a core piece of your technology. So yeah, we learned the hard way that we did that. We actually ended up rewriting it all, rebuilding it all ourselves anyway. And I've seen that over and over again. So I think as long as it's not part of your core technology, I think it can work. We kind of even went into it expecting, we're going to need super strong managers on both sides, and I think we can make this work, and it might be economical at the end. I just haven't seen it work well when that piece is something you need to maintain and keep going for the long haul.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to talk about the distinctions, because there's offshore, there's nearshore. We're talking remote workers and that kind of thing, and then there's hiring a in-country team kind of thing. The kind of thing that I'm talking about today is your single integrated team remotely, individuals in different places, not a remote team, not a team in where I'm contracting with another organization that puts together all the people. I hire each and every person. They go through our interview process. They come into Bend and they go through our onboarding. They're really a first-class member of our team, as opposed to us hiring an agency and doing work that way.
Fantastic. So pivoting a little bit, in a topic that's a little bit near and dear to my heart, women in technology, and tends to make people just slightly uncomfortable. There's a big effort right now going on with diversity and inclusion. And what I really want to talk about is, are you seeing more women on your engineering dev teams?
Yeah, this is a really tough question. Thank you, Teri, for asking. So
two guys.
Yeah, really. Yeah, there's a lot of diversity up here. Okay, so we spent a lot of time and energy on this problem. Still do. Amazon actually has embraced the efforts as well that we kind of had started. I guess the main and most important thing is it starts at the top, like the board of directors, the CEO, CTO, all the managers need to be kind of on board that this is a problem to be as number one thing. And so we just tried to solve that problem, right? Like, can we make sure everybody understands this is a problem? We put it in our onboarding process. We had like a diversity 101 training as part of onboarding. We signed this Tech Town pledge. I don't know if people have heard about that, but in Portland there's this kind of pledge you can take. About 27 companies have signed on about yeah, we're gonna do this as part of our onboarding. We're gonna measure it. We're gonna report on it, and we're going to train the folks internally on what the problem is. So we started there, and TechTown actually publishes the results every year, and there's some correlated improvements. I don't know if anybody in here can talk to it, but if you can go to techtown.org, I think it is. There's a lot of stats, and kind of you can analyze the data and cut and slice it in various ways. But it's going to be a multi-generational problem. But step one is just kind of admitting there is one.
Yeah. It's kind of a good news, bad news situation for us. The good news is people are aware of the problem, and they're spending a lot of time on it. You mentioned Amazon, all the big, FANG or whatever acronym you want to use for all the big software tech companies, all are actively recruiting. They're aware. They're putting programs in place. And for little folks like us, it's a little hard because the pool of women engineers is already tiny, and now you have this kind of renewed focus by the bigger organizations, which overall is a great improvement to the whole ecosystem. Personally, it's hard because it's harder for me to find and hire women engineers, but we actually had one accept an offer today, so woohoo.
So we know there's a pipeline problem. We also know OSU Cascades Computer Science Department is almost at 50% parity right now with their 80 students, which is thrilling. Yes, big shout out for them. What suggestions do you have that companies could do to become more inclusive? So once you have these women on board, beyond the initial training to get them on board, are you working with teams? Is there unconscious bias training? Are there things where it's not just out going for beers after hours when they potentially have to get home for families? Are there other things that are being done?
Yeah, I think one of the most eye-opening ones for me is we did do an unconscious bias training. Anybody else do that in the room before? Yeah. I don't know about you, but for me, it was actually, there was quite a few that I had going on, and I didn't realize it. So, I felt it was pretty eye-opening to say, oh yeah, that is something I'm doing. It's really easy to fix. I can just fix that. Some of them are harder to fix, but that was really effective. And it's one of those things, again, if it's coming from the top, it's in the culture, you have an open conversation about it, I think it can help a lot with adding, making folks feel more included.
Yeah, I think coming from the top is important, and we also try and have as much of a balance as we can in our executive team. Our chief product officer is a female, a woman, and the last organization I worked at was kind of unique in that it was a majority of women, and the executive leadership team of 7 people, 5 were women, and even there, we had a lot of training. Even though throughout the organization, it really doesn't matter what the makeup of the organization is. I think we're at a stage where everybody needs the bias training and more equity training and understanding equality training and understanding how these things affect us in our daily office lives.
So have I made them uncomfortable enough? Should I switch?
Yes.
We still have questions, I'm sure, coming. So.
We do. We have some other questions, but on this topic, yes, we are making progress. Are we as women going to accept multi-generational? Probably not. I think we're going to see a lot more. Is there anything that you would say as an individual right now that, whether you have daughters or, a sister or mother that's in the field, that you would say, you know what? Let me give you this piece of advice, how to have a conversation with somebody if you're seeing something.
I thought it was going to get easier.
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I've been trying to get her involved in tech as much as she's interested in it, and I think she is showing a lot of interest. My wife is also involved. She's a PhD at OHSU, and runs into her own situations there as well in that industry, in academics world. So we've honestly been just really open with my daughter that this exists at this point, and that speak up and try to get brave and make sure you confront the issues. That's what we're trying to instill in her.
Yeah, I think also it's important to help the people you care about, especially younger people coming up, understand what's okay and what's not okay. And because a lot of times you'll blame yourself, I'm not fitting in or whatever, but also having that clear understanding of what behavior is unacceptable and when it happens, making sure that there are clear avenues to address those kinds of things.
So we're going to pivot now and talk about keeping the talent that you've worked so hard to get on your team. So what are some of the things that you're employing right now to manage and keep those top talent teams?
I technically don't have anybody employed anymore, but when I did, so it's interesting because I think it's been a challenge forever. When we started Elemental, we were a startup, we didn't have much to offer, so you always have to sell, folks that are going to work for you on this vision and bring them into the tent, essentially, as far as, we're in this together, we're on a team. You got to show the bigger vision, right? And it's not just a paycheck, hopefully, for folks that are joining your team. So, and it's been interesting because that was the case when we were a startup. It was obvious that's a problem when you're a startup. But even as part of Amazon, AWS has, I can't say how many thousands of people, thousands and thousands of engineers, and hundreds and hundreds of teams. And all of these teams are constantly recruiting. Like they're built to recruit as fast and grow as fast as they can. And they can recruit from technically internally. It's kind of looked down upon to do it aggressively, but it's always in the back of your mind as a leader. You have to be, if you have a developer on your team, you need to be honest with yourself that they're constantly getting recruited, whether it's from internal or LinkedIn or wherever. So you just kind of constantly have to be putting energy into the marketing your team and why are you here and why are we all here? So we were always, one good concrete example, we would always be very open about our books and our runway and how many months we have left to survive. That was an interesting way to just keep people really engaged and see, oh yeah, we've got 6 months to live, we better buckle down this weekend. So those are kind of nice ways to just kind of keep people in the loop. To me, it starts with me. I mean, I'm pretty picky about where I work and what I do, and I think if I'm at an organization, it's because I believe in it and I think we're doing interesting work and it matters. And so, I usually start there. And then the other thing is I treat people with, a lot of respect and give them a lot of room. I'm pretty much a hands-off kind of manager, and the kind of people who work best in my organizations are people who, have some strong drive and commitment, and also have the ability. We give them the ability to make a significant impact. There are other little things we do, just all the usual tech things. It's harder to do as a remote employee. When I worked at Google, they fed me all the time. There was a rule. I think a Googler, as you're called, could never be more than 100 yards from food or something. I'm not kidding. That was actually but when you're a remote employee, well, you're really close. You got the kitchen down the hall, but we're not stocking your kitchen. So you have to do different things. So trying to make their remote lives comfortable. For technology folks, we like hardware. Bandwidth and all those kinds of things. So we try to accommodate that. And also, at Amplion, we have a unlimited vacation policy, which
you know, when you first hear it, that sounds kind of crazy. But actually, historically, the problem with unlimited vacation policies is people don't take enough vacation. So I also encourage people to go away, and I try and lead by example.
So some companies regularly purge their ranks. Is that useful in keeping your elite teams productive?
That's a larger company question. I used to work at Microsoft. We worked at Google, some other places, and we had a policy where, you know, every year you would trim off the bottom, you know, 2 to 5% or something like that. Well, there are different schools of thought there. You know, I actually found it to be effective. Because if someone really was in the bottom, you know, couple percent, and they'd been there for a while, Google had these really interesting metrics. Google loves data, and where, you know, they'll kind of notice when employees are plateauing or they're just not moving their career forward. And the idea is that you know Google hired these people. It's hard to get in, and you know, there's the belief that they're they're really talented at their work. So if they're plateauing or you know, headed down, you know, it's either there's a situational problem, or maybe, you know, it's better for that person if they go somewhere else. And I think for an organization, especially large organizations, some change and some, you know, turnover is definitely a good thing to keep the organization fresh.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really, really hard. Us as humans do not want to put people in buckets, and we don't want to stack rank people on your team. But it is a team, you know. It's a sports team in a lot of ways, and you need to ensure that those top performers are performing, and you need to invest in those people. A lot of times you end up investing in the weakest performers. It takes most of your time, and that's something you just kind of have to. We would have to keep telling ourselves, nope, we got to really focus on the top performers and make sure they're happy. Plus, I've personally been on teams where there's a weak performer that's been able to stay, and that's just a toxic situation for a team. So I think most people appreciate it, and those folks that are not working out, they know it already. And as a leader, I always felt better getting over that fear, getting through those hard times every year.
And it sounds harsh, you know, to eliminate the bottom % of an organization, but also one thing you need to keep in mind in some of these really large organizations is hard to fire people. So this kind of makes up for that. Like in a small startup, if you know you have somebody who's toxic in the team, firing them quickly is very important. But it can be really hard to do. You know, get through the HR department at Microsoft is a slow process.
Daunting at best. So you mentioned stacked ranking. For those non-technical people in the room or might not have heard of it, can you go into that? And is that something that when you've used it or employed it, do you publish that to everybody so they know where they're at?
Yeah, this is the part of stack ranking that's really uncomfortable when you've gone through that process, and the team knows potentially that you're going through that process. That's another challenging time. We never publish anything like that. We do have one-on-one conversations with folks, you know, especially top performers and the bottom performers. But most importantly, we had a career plan for every person on the team. So, and you know, a positive one, hopefully. And those folks that were not moving through that career plan, you know, ideally that career plan is built with together with the employee. But if they're not moving through that, then it should be very obvious by the time you have to get to that point.
Yes, stack ranking in all the organizations I've been in is only shared with the management. It sounds pretty harsh, and you know nobody likes to be stack ranked, you know, unless you're on top. And then I say, oh well, that's pretty awesome. But
and your expectations are higher.
yeah. But everybody knows, right? And it's if you're a good manager, your stack rank actually reflects, you know, the realities of the team, and so it's not a surprise to anyone.
Okay, so you mentioned generational differences, And with, I think they said somewhere like 5 generations in the workforce right now that you may be working alongside with, what are some practices that you've implemented to blend the expectations of the emerging workforce with the rank and file?
That's a good one.
Well,
I'll let you go first.
yeah.
They gave me some leeway with the questions.
Yeah, that was a new one. Well, I'm in my 50s, so in the tech world, I'm really old. I think really the thing that I try and do to help with the blending is actually blend. I specifically try and hire a diverse group of people. I try and hire people who are in the beginning of their career and the people who've been in their career for a long time, and kind of mix them up. And kind of that seems to solve most of the problems. I think one of the other things that's really important is what you mentioned earlier, is having a career path for people, so people can feel comfortable and not threatened by somebody who's coming up or somebody who's really well established. But there are ways for them to contribute well and actually seek out the other people. With our team right now at Amplion, it's pretty mixed, and it's been really great to see the pairing up that's happened with the more experienced people and the people who are really just eager to learn, and it's raised the team entirely. If I had a team of all 20-year-olds, we wouldn't be nearly as good as we are with the mix.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I'm glad I let you go first. I think having that career plan for everybody helps neutralize any kind of strange feelings about somebody that's maybe new and struggling, or new and really taken off, versus somebody that's been there a while and is doing one of those two things. So I really like the idea of having, I think having that career plan for everybody really helps neutralize that. Obviously, very one-on-ones with your teams, you have to, every person is going to be different, whether they're new or not new. Just you got to shape your team the way you need it, and I don't think there's one answer for all that.
Certainly is not. So, with both of you being here relatively new, you chose Ben for a reason. What is your prognosis for Ben-based companies having meaningful exits here, and/or would they have to leave Ben to do that?
I could tell you a quick story. So when we started Elemental, we started in Portland, and we got so much feedback that we should be in the Bay Area, right? You guys should be in the Bay Area. We got all this Bay Area bias people talk about. But if anybody knew my other co-founder, Sam Blackman, he grew up in Portland. He was adamant, no, we are never going to move this company. We all love Sam. Yeah, he's a Portland boy, right? And we're going to build this in Portland, and we're going to grow it in Portland. And we did, and we exited, and Amazon now has headquarters in Portland, and it's seeded by Elemental's acquisition. There's a whole other building there now, and a team from 7 or 8 teams now, AWS teams there. So I think it can happen. It doesn't matter where you are. We had that hurdle to climb out of Portland, and I don't see any reason a Ben company can't do the same.
Yeah, I think it can happen. I think it would be a challenge. The bigger the organization, probably the harder. I had a similar thing where when I was in Seattle and Picnic was getting ready to be acquired, we were talking to Apple. We would have been their first development house in Seattle. Google already had one going, and Facebook was just kind of starting, and this was like 2010. And so there you could say, oh, sure, it's a bigger city, but it seemed like a stretch then that people would move to Seattle from the Bay Area, that they'd choose that over the Bay Area. But now it seems obvious, and I think that kind of thing could happen here too. We have some things we need to get better at. The universities are coming online. They need more of a presence. We need more of a flow of technology workers for, I think, a big big company like Amazon to put a branch here. But on the other hand, play both sides of the fence, Google has places all over. And really, I didn't mention this earlier, but when we were talking about remote working, the place where I really kind of got the kind of idea that remote working could work was when I worked at Google. They bought out the company I had called Picnic, and so I was at the Google office in Seattle, and the people I worked with from day to day were in California, in the LA area and that kind of thing, and I traveled down there every now and then, but every meeting we had was a video meeting. So, once you've started to do all this remote work, it's a lot easier to say, we could put an office in Bend. And so I think, it's much more likely now, given the state of remote working, than it was, 5-10 years ago.
Fantastic. So, Julie, do we have time for questions? Do you want to facilitate that, or? Okay. Do we have any? Thank you.
So at the beginning, you both talked about remote employees and then also hiring outsource international staff. So combine that. I have 7 employees that work in Europe, and they're employees. It's not an outsource development team. And so do either of you have experience in managing people there where they're 9 time zones away, where, yeah, you do video calls, but how do you work with somebody to make them feel like you're part of a team here in the U.S. on the West Coast, but they're so far away?
So I have to restate the question for the other room. When you're managing teams that are employees, but they're 9 time zones away, how do you integrate them into your West Coast team and making sure that everybody is part of the organization?
Yeah, so we had sales and support offices all over the world, and that's probably the closest experience I had. And it is really hard, but we essentially make sure we are replicating the culture in those other offices, whether through the leadership or through just really trying hard to keep them included in what we're doing. Make sure when we do schedule something, it's not at a ridiculous time for other folks. And yeah, the other thing I think that makes it that possible is have a very clear set of values for your organization. We did a really cool experiment in the early days. Basically, you sit around when you feel like you've got your culture sort of set. You say, okay, we're going to send somebody to the moon to create the moon office. Who would that be? And everybody kind of brainstorms, and it happened to be like everybody came up with the same person. And so then it's like, okay, what about that person is special, and why do we all think that that person represents our culture? And then we kind of came out with some values for that. So doing so, I think, helps you scale across cultures and boundaries and time zones. It's one idea to help with that.
It's hard. I don't have any good solutions. I had an Indian team, and they're 12 hours. And 12 hours is there are no convenient times. I think if you're considering doing this, hiring an offshore team or even a nearshore team, one thing I would say is it's not for beginners. It's if you're a technology team, certainly you don't want to send your core stuff off, but even your peripheral kinds of things, I would say, and this doesn't really address your culture thing, but you need to be able to run a local team before you run a remote team.
Okay, any more questions? Yes.
Look back on your success with your exits. What were the maybe top 2 or 3 things that allowed you to be successful in your organizations?
So what were the top 2 or 3 things that allowed you to be successful in your organizations that you exited from?
Are you asking about a successful exit, like integration time, or leading up to that time?
What was the success for the company as a whole?
So yeah, I mean, so one, I think it goes hand in hand. Like the culture of the acquiring company should match the culture of the acquiree as much as possible, and I think that that helps in a lot of ways. It helps the integration go smoothly. It helps the field and all your customers get a consistent experience. It helps with everybody understanding why this happened. And so the culture is so important in that success of the integration and a successful acquisition and getting there, honestly. Like, we've talked a lot about the culture today. It's such an important piece that if you get that right, I think a lot of things follow.
Yeah, kind of a mixed bag. The two exits for me were really, I think one of the reasons they were successful, at least up to the point of the exit, was because we weren't trying to exit. We, some things had changed or whatever, and we decided that it was time to move on. And so, we ran it as it was our passion, and we hired the people that we needed to hire, and we built the thing that we wanted to go to every day. It's cliched, but it's really what it was. And then one of the exits to Google, I had a fascinating time at Google, but I would say it was a complete failure because personality-wise, we were mostly matched up, but you look at it, every exit of a technology company, they say, oh, well, big companies acquiring a little company, we're gonna keep the little company around, or we're gonna run that thing for a while. No, they're not. They're gonna shut it down, and it kind of breaks your heart. They have reasons that make sense. You may even agree with their reasons for shutting down your product, but I wouldn't call that a success.
All right. Do you have any closing comments?
No,
Haiku?
I can't come up with a haiku really quickly like that. But no, thanks for having me. This business community here is great, and it's welcoming, and it's exciting. I'm happy to be a part of it, and looking forward to working with you guys soon.
Yeah, thanks, Fred, for putting these on. It's really great. I've been in Bend for about 5 years now, but full time only for about a year or so. And actually, one of the reasons I started working at Amplion was to get to know Bend, and I thought, what better way to get to know people, but to dive right in and kind of get in the mix. And it's been you guys have been very welcoming, and I can't imagine a better place.
Well, thank the three of you so much. Teri, thanks for moderating. We have a small gift for you. And we have these, for the PubTalk speakers, we have these tankards. And what happens is if you bring them back during a PubTalk, McManamons will fill them up.
Oh, no way.
All right.
So
Like it
thanks.
even better now.
Thanks so much. Round of applause for our
This
speakers.
could be trouble.
Okay, so